Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. I'm your host, George Kurt, joined by the one and only Cody Roadcap. Cody, going into championship weekend, 4 teams remain. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Sad that the football season is coming to an end, and I know we're going to talk about all these great matchups and great games. And I wish Green Bay was in it, but I also feel like pretty stoked that I don't think there's a team I don't want to like. I'm happy if any of the 4 teams win, and whatever matchup that creates in the Super Bowl, I'll be happy with. And that doesn't happen very often.
No, definitely not. I mean, I am not a fan of the Chiefs going through, but you have to respect if they do three-peat. Like, that's just one of those things. But no, I mean, a lot of intriguing matchups that can come out of this weekend. Interested to see how it turns out. A lot of familiarity we're going to be talking about with a third matchup in the NFC Championship and a rematch in the AFC Championship. So we're going to see how things shake up differently than it has so far this season. You and I will dive into that as we go and hit some news. Make sure you follow us at the Couch GMs on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok to get even more than you do from the show. And you can always DM us with any questions you have on those platforms or watch us live Mondays and Thursdays at 6:30 East, where you can comment, get involved. And don't worry, even with no games next weekend and going into the Super Bowl, we're still going to be here Monday and Thursday the next 2 weeks. And then after the Super Bowl, we will talk about our schedule from there. But Cody, in the meantime, why don't we sit back, relax, and chat? If I told you the Jags did something good, would you believe me?
I would argue, is it good if it's 17 days past when it should have been done?
They're the Jags, so it's good for them, right?
Yes.
Jags fired very controversial GM Trent Baalke. I think they had to hear multiple head coaching candidates say that they were not going to come there with him at GM in order to make this move. At least that's what it seems like from the outside. But honestly, a full clean house in Jacksonville seems like the right move.
Yeah, and I don't think that's far off. Like we heard last year, they could have got, Jacksonville Pride, Byron Letwich to come, or I guess not last year, but the year they hired Doug Peterson to come
2 years
be
ago, then. Yep.
the head coach, but he wanted to bring a guy with him. And they're like, no, we're going to ride out with Trent Baalke, who got to, made it through the head coach firing that time. Then it was surprised everybody when he didn't get let go with Doug Peterson. It sounds like that was the main reason that Ben Johnson decided to go to Chicago over Jacksonville was the structure. And then their second choice, or some may argue their top choice in Bucks coordinator Liam Cohen, also withdrew his name because of the structure. However, that story has been breaking as we about to go live tonight. That plot twist, he is back in full consideration now that he is fired. Once they fired him, they reached back out and they've re-engaged in talks. He is in Jacksonville now, and there is some rumors and speculations that this is going to end with him ultimately being the head coach of the Jaguars anyway. So it looked like it was going to cost them multiple head coach candidates, but it sounds like they might have salvaged at least one. Although the interesting part about that is the Buccaneers did tentatively agree to a deal to make Cohen the highest paid offensive coordinator in the league. So he at least has that to fall back on. But there is some, well, now that if he doesn't agree to it now, do they still want him? Causing all kinds of drama, but that's what we live for in the offseason, almost offseason, back and forth. So very interesting to see how this all plays out. And if anything breaks while we're going through the show here, we'll definitely let you know.
Definitely will. I mean, it definitely sounds like Cohen is going to end up being the head coach of the Jags, but nothing official that we can report yet. It's just interesting how there's all this drama around like the Buccaneers all of a sudden said like they couldn't contact him. He never signed his deal. It's just the way that we talked about right before the show here. Nothing can happen with the Jaguars without some kind of drama. So here we are. They make the right move 17 days late, and then their head coach hiring is probably going to be full of drama.
Yeah, but I in all like outside of the drama, I do think Liam Cohen would be a really great fit for Trevor Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
Help build that team up. Getting a GM in there, which is another interesting thing too, is like they're gonna hire the head coach and then bring the GM in. how does that, go? And we just saw a Tampa Bay executive go to Las Vegas to be the GM there. So unless they want to pull from that same brain trust, it's probably gonna be a guy that hasn't worked directly with Liam Cohen recently. So definitely think it's gonna be interesting how to play out, but I do think that'll be a benefit. Maybe start to salvage some of Trevor Lawrence, who still has the ability to be a good quarterback in this league. Maybe even salvage a guy like Travis Etienne, who has struggled, but we saw what he did with rookie Bucky Irving, and they're similar play styles. So would love to see that matchup in Tampa Bay if it all comes together.
I agree, and I would think that Cohen probably would have some sort of a say over their GM hire if they bring him in first, with the way that this whole entire thing has gone down. Or at least they would, run by like, "Hey, do you really not want this hire?" And then have to consider, "Do we really want to make this or not?" I think they would have to look at how many people saw red flags in their GM before and, think that there has to be some kind of relationship between the GM and the head coach. But they're also the Jaguars, where like they might not care. And like you said, they are one of the most poorly run franchises in the NFL. So I don't want to like give them too much credit before we do see what happens.
Yeah, and I think sometimes too we also like overvalue the head coach and GM working together or having experience in their last stop. I mean, just look at the Jets. They hired Aaron Glenn. That was a big news for them. Everyone thought the GM coming in was going to be Lance Newmark. If you're not a big diehard person of all these new, you're probably like, who's that dude? Longtime Lions executive. He spent the year with the Commanders this year. They have a connection. Uh, he still is a candidate, but they're also interviewing elsewhere too. So that's just another situation where, yeah, they're going to consider that guy, but it doesn't have to work out that way. And we see that all the time. GM makes it one extra cycle or not. So really, if they can work together, that's all that really matters.
Exactly. And you kind of did mention our next point in our rundown. The Jets did hire Aaron Glenn as head coach. So that is the um second Lions coordinator gone. They are officially now having to start fresh there.
Yeah, they also lost their defensive line coach to the defensive coordinator role for the New England Patriots, who also have an interesting offensive coordinator, but we'll talk about that in a second. Um, but they replaced him with the Buccaneers defensive line coach. So the Buccaneers could be out two coordinator coaches this offseason after their run to the playoffs as well.
Yeah, but interested to see how the Aaron Glenn to the Jets hire works. The Jets seem to be one of those few teams that like to hire defensive minded coaches. I noticed that there's a lot of teams that lean towards offensive minded head coaches in today's NFL. Um, but a team with a lot of potential, I think, on the defensive side. Good to bring somebody in who can, build a solid system over there. Most of their questions are on the offense. And of course, we're going to be listening to how Aaron Rodgers likes this hire, or if it's going to rely more on who the offensive coordinator coming in is since Aaron Glenn's the defensive minded coach.
I do know Jeremy Fowler put out earlier today, or maybe it was late yesterday, uh, that the talk around executives in the league is the anticipation that Aaron Rodgers will, in fact, retire. Uh, so that could play no factor at all. But it's also been speculated that Adams, Rodgers, and Lazard will all be moved on from the Jets organization. So kind of saying goodbye to all those ex-Packers.
And if Rodgers is going to be moving to a new team, it kind of feels to me like him retiring makes the most sense. Just like at this point, does it make sense for him to do a 1 year swan song in a whole new system with a whole new team? I personally don't think it makes sense. It's interesting to see mostly where Adams goes because he still has the ability to be a game changing wide receiver. There's going to be some teams with younger quarterbacks that are going to look to bring in a guy like that and try to elevate their play.
I know one team that he would fit great on,
Where's that?
the team that drafted him. Bring him home.
Making the reunion in Green Bay. That would be very interesting, and it is one of the major positions of need that Green Bay needs to take the next step. So that would be intriguing.
Yeah, bring him home. Let him, 2-year contract. Let him play out, similar to the Mike Evans deal. Let Devontae Adams, come back in, be the leader in that room. You're not going to have Christian Watson for at least 12 weeks next year, if not even the whole season, because of the ACL he tore in the last week of the season. Romeo Dobbs, double head concussion, or like two concussions in a month time, not great. Wicks, Reed, all of them, had moments, but not great. So there's talent there, but no one has stepped forward. So maybe getting a guy that's bona fide number one and let those two continue, or no one have to like be forced into that mantle and let them continue to grow and develop would be great for the Packers. Or maybe that's just a fan that loves Devontae Adams wishful thinking. I don't know. You can decide.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna have to figure out what the market looks like as we get closer, but I think it makes sense in the terms of just like, potential landing spots. So I'll let you dream a little bit and we'll see what happens. But no definitive news on him or Rodgers or any of those guys in or out in New York, just speculation there. And then I have on here quick shout out to whoever said Josh McDaniels was going back to New England. I wanted to say it was you, but I wasn't sure if it was Marcus.
It was me, uh, but I saw that online. So shout out to that guy that I saw it. Uh, it was early when Vrabel got hired. Someone had tweeted out like one of the guys he had mentioned was bringing back Josh McDaniels, which I think is just funny, like just kind of like replacing Bill Belichick with Vrabel and
Yeah,
like let's run it back,
pretty
kind of
much.
thing. I think it's he's shown that he can be a good offensive coordinator. I think he could be good for Drake May. Uh, I did see a tweet, I believe, and I might be misquoting it, but I believe it said he got his first stint in New England in 2001, and
Mhm.
Drake May was born in 2002. So that was just a fun, or online thing. But yeah, interested to see how it plays out. But I think that another nice thing too with this one is, we talk all the time about how defensive head coaches, if they bring an offensive coordinator in and their offense is good, they're replacing them the following years. That's why we see a lot of teams favor the offensive guy
Yep.
because, defense consistently has not been, year to year over and over. Like there's the ups and downs. It's more fluid where offenses, they build upon and build upon. Um, but the good thing about this one is you don't got to worry about Josh McDaniels going anywhere. Like I think he's
He's got his
between
chances.
between Denver, Las Vegas, and what happened with the Colts. I think he's, pretty much eliminated from a third head coaching gig, bearing, you know, to like a Super Bowl run with the number one offense in the league kind of thing.
And even yet, like I think he's kind of proven that like very good offensive coordinator if he has the right pieces, but not a great head coach. He's just not that guy to manage an entire team. And that's fine. But I was actually going to mention similar, like you see a lot of what I would say, like almost like legacy coaches or coaches that you're not going to have to worry about leaving on the defensive side of the ball. Like Vic Fangio and Steve Spagnuolo are the two guys that I'm thinking of right off the bat. But even though Spags has been getting some head coaching interviews, but I don't think he's going anywhere.
Yeah. And
But like on the offense, now you got Josh McDaniels in the same situation.
yeah. And, speaking of Spags, I heard someone talk about it and I want to get your thoughts too. And, a lot of it could depend on what happens over the next 3 weeks, right? The
Mhm.
Chiefs do three-peat. But how the Chiefs have turned from this dominant offense to this elite defense, and last year they won their Super Bowl on their defense. If they do it again this year, it's going to be on their defense. Uh, is there a case for Steve Spagnuolo to be the first non-head coach in the Hall of Fame?
I think there could be because like a lot of, what being in the Hall of Fame is for players, it's, being dominant and all the numbers and whatever. But for coaches, it's just like the impact they've made on the game. And you don't have to be a head coach to make a kind of impact on a game, coming up with schemes that change the game or the fact that he's been at this for so long and he's had dominant defenses for so long, been able to adapt, been able to change so many things. Like I think there definitely is a case for him to be the first non-head coach in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. And don't forget, he also has a ring with the Giants as well before coming and joining the dynasty that is the Kansas City Chiefs, which we will talk about in just a minute. But real quick, some other updates on the head coaching. There's been some weather. down south, so New Orleans has had to shift some things around. But sounds like Kellen Moore and Patrick Graham are going to get some, maybe not Pat, that might have been Jacksonville, some interviews there. Uh, Cowboys are heating up with just going with offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer, which just is Kellen Moore is still the betting odds favorite, but there's been some buzz around that. It also came out today that there's at least some interest. No formal request has been made, but at least some interest in potentially reaching out to Packers assistant head coach, special teams coach Rich Bisaccia. He was this longtime
Ah,
special teams coach in Dallas. You saw what he did with the interim. So that would be an interesting one. And then the Las Vegas Raiders, who seem to be all in on Ben Johnson. Uh, Seems like Pete Carroll it might be the leader in the
hmm.
clubhouse now as they pivot forward. Which honestly, as you know, the Raiders need a lot of help, a lot of things. Someone to come in and like build the culture, build it up, might not be a bad idea to get a guy like Pete Carroll in there for a lack of better word, stopgap coach, like
Yeah.
similar to what we saw in Seattle. Obviously, they did win, but as you got near the end, they're like, "Hey, we're going to move on. You know, thank you for all your service. We're going to move on, get a little bit younger." Could see something like that take place in Las Vegas if they desire.
I'm interested if it's similar to what the Jags tried to do with Tom Coughlin a few years back, and then they moved him to the front office when he left the sideline. Like if Pete Carroll gets to that kind of situation, if he does end up as a head coach there.
Yeah, and I think he was supposed to do that in Seattle. I just don't know how much he actually. But I think then that was like the plan. But I think he might have been a consultant or something like that this past year. But
Hmm.
he missed coaching, and so I don't know how big of a role he played in the quote unquote front office. So a lot of
Makes
things
sense.
to pay attention to. But we could talk games now, I think, if you're ready to do that.
I am ready to talk some games. Only two to talk about this week, so we can take a pretty deep dive and see where the talk ends up here. Starting off, NFC Championship Commanders at Eagles, the 3 o'clock game. Over under on this one at 47.5, and Washington a 6 point underdog. Not sure how high that ranks on most points favored, in championship game history. I'm sure there's been some pretty big ones, but 6 is pretty steep when you get this deep into the playoffs.
Yeah, I would bet you'd be surprised on how many are, six or a touchdown. How many times we've seen a number one seed get upset after a bye, and then can they do it again? Or it was like, oh, that was a magical run kind of thing. Uh, so I don't mind 6 points. I know the Commanders did beat them the last time they played, although that was the game that Jalen Hurts got knocked out of because of a concussion. So we'll see. Can the Commanders repeat themselves, like I mentioned, and have a dominant performance, play turnover-free football, have a good game from start to finish? I think the biggest concern or issue, and Marcus brought this up on Monday, is their offensive lineman, Sam Cosmi. Uh, we'll see if he actually goes to IR. They only have to do that if they need the spot, and we're so late in the
Yeah.
season, it's hard to bring in people, so he might not officially go to IR, but he tore his ACL in Detroit, so he is not going to be playing this week. And how does that hold up against guys like uh, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, like
Mhm.
a lot of good places along the interior defense of Philadelphia. So I think Philadelphia is going to come out a little bit upset that they lost that game. I think they're starting to hear the noise that they've won 2 playoff games, but nobody feels great about them. And I think they take care of business and get back to the Super Bowl.
I think with both of these games, but with this one especially, the two storylines are, like I said earlier, familiarity. When you're playing a divisional game, things can get a little wonky. You've seen this team, these two specifically, you've seen they played each other. This will be the third time in 2.5 months because the Commanders didn't actually play the Eagles so most of the way through the season. And then obviously 2 weeks before the end of the season. So it's it's interesting when there's that much familiarity. But then the other thing is the turnover free football. Like the 4 teams remaining are the 4 teams in the playoffs that did not have a turnover. So people are obviously complaining about how Hurts has not been able to execute in the pass game, but they also haven't turned the ball over. and not giving extra possessions to the other team is a big reason why they've been able to get as far as they have, despite not having the most explosive offense, at least through the air. Their run game's still been explosive like it has all season. But now you're going against a team that's forced a lot of turnovers, also hasn't turned the ball over. Is this going to be the cleanest game, or is this the game that like everything's going to start folding and it's going to be, does one of the teams turn the ball over, do both, and it kind of turns into a hectic situation? Like that's, I think, going to be the biggest question on who's going to win this game to me, is who takes care of the ball and doesn't worry about the noise of like, you don't want Jaden Daniels to have to go out there and throw 45 times necessarily. Like he's been really good with his legs to open up the offense, and then they've been opportunistic and hitting big plays. You don't want Jalen Hurts to go out there and throw for over 250 yards, apparently, because in his playoff career, he's 4-0 throwing less than 250 and 0-3 throwing for more than 250. So it just shows you what we're looking at in a game plan format for both of these teams. They're going to control the ball and not give extra possessions.
Yeah, and I think both these teams can overcome a turnover. But to your point, I think if one has to throw the ball more, the Commanders feel better about the Jaden Daniels doing it than the Eagles would feel about Jalen Hurts, especially with the banged up knee. His propensity to take sacks, like we talked about it. Even you said, right now, who's playing better football? It's Jaden Daniels over Jalen Hurts. So it's definitely should be a fun game, and I think it's a great game to kick off the weekend. I know there's only 2 games, so one of but like the other one has like the playbill or like the headline billing.
Yep.
But that game could be Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, and then this Commanders Eagles game is the women's fight before, which everyone's talking about on Monday.
It's 100% true. And we didn't even talk injuries quick, so I'll just run through the injury report. So Hurts and Quinyon Mitchell, the two guys that were, headliners of the injury report coming out of the Rams game, are both full participants. They should both be good to go with no issues. I mean, we'll see how much Hurts' mobility gets affected, but like he's going to go, and he said he can run. We'll see. Big news for the Eagles: Dallas Goedert, their starting tight end, and their starting center are both not participating in practice. So Eagles gonna have a shakeup on the offensive line as well as the Commanders if Juergens can't go. But I think that they have a lot of depth up there, so it's not going to affect them all that much.
So the story is writing itself. Juergens isn't going to play.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to make the call. Kelsey's going to return for the Super Bowl. He's going to have 2 weeks to put on the weight. Kelsey versus Kelsey part 2.
I see that not happening in any lifetime, but that would be the storyline the NFL was looking for, right?
Yeah, I agree. It's not happening. There's I'm sure there's like 3 Eagles fans out there that are like hoping that he comes back for it. Even though
I wouldn't give him
I
that much
think
credit.
he's lost
it's definitely
like 4.
more than 3, because Eagles Twitter will probably start going crazy about it as soon as somebody mentions it.
But I think he's already lost like 40 pounds. Like he's not putting that back on in 2 weeks. So
no.
And he has maybe ESPN's done for the season, so his responsibilities might be over. I mean,
Isn't he doing a late night talk show for them though?
Yeah, which is great that you haven't watched it. I've only seen clips.
I have not watched it either. No,
I don't watch a ton of sports shows. I'm not gonna lie. I don't watch the Fox pregame shows, the CBS pregame shows. I don't even. I watch clips online if someone says something good, but I don't pay too much attention to that. I listen to podcasts, and you should listen to ours.
Honestly, it's the same way, and I think that's where sports media is going. If we want to have a rabbit hole about sports media here on Conference Championship Weekend,
we don't have time for that. I know we have less games to talk about, but we don't have time to talk about that one yet. Commanders Eagles should be a good one, but I mentioned it. It's the headliner, the main event. We're recording this 3 years to the day from the infamous Bills-Chiefs game, which a lot of people say is one of the best games they've seen in their lifetime. The back and forth, it changed the playoff overtime rules. Bills at Chiefs, 6:30. Chiefs are 1.5 point favorites. Over under 47.5. And the big question is, can the Bills get over the hump?
So when looking at familiarity in this one, they obviously have played multiple times over the last few years, and they played earlier this year in Buffalo. The Bills handled that game about as well as you would expect them to be able to against a top tier opponent. One of the few times that Mahomes wasn't in a game in the final drive, like there was a 2-possession win. But this Chiefs team has been improving a lot since that point. As soon as Mahomes started to get on his same page with some of these receivers, they got a couple of guys back from injury. They're starting to be able to pass the ball more efficiently. Obviously, Travis Kelce's come on in the second half of the season. The only thing the Chiefs haven't really been super successful in is running the ball. They're still been very mediocre in yards per carry, but they've been able to be effective enough to open up the offense. So this still doesn't feel quite like the juggernaut Chiefs that we're used to. But we also have to remember last year they didn't feel like the juggernaut Chiefs either, but they just went out there and played defense and scored enough. And I feel like that paired with the Mahomes clutch gene that we've seen over the last few seasons, this team's never going to be out of it.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that since that, infamous 2021 game, the Bills haven't lost the Chiefs in the regular season. They are 4-0. They are 2-0 in the playoffs. If or I guess 3-0 if you want to go back to 21. But so 3-0 or 0-3 in the playoffs, 4-0 in the regular season. Can they break the trend? And that's going to be the question we're going to talk about. And I'm fascinated to see, do they come out loose? Josh Allen is comfortable. Can you tell that they're playing with the cloud over them, like we've seen a lot of teams play with the Chiefs? It's going to be cold at Arrowhead once again, but that shouldn't affect Buffalo too much. They know how to play in the weather. And it's interesting because both of these teams are, they match up really well. The defense is carrying the Chiefs. It's been more of the run game and defense as of late for the Buffalo Bills, but they're deceptible. We saw it even in the last drive. That was a 2-point conversion away from, the Ravens defense having an opportunity to make a stop and get a win. We all expect Josh Allen would have got them back down the field because that's the type of player he is. But their defense has holes in it. And Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes just turn it on in the playoffs. And I know Marcus talked about, the same thing. And I think we saw, against the Texans, that big play. Like Travis doesn't have the legs he once had to complete the touchdown. He got tackled inside the 5, but he's always open. And
Yep.
they just find a way. I mean, look no further than that crazy vintage Patrick Mahomes play. 4th down, falling down, zips it in to Travis Kelce. Like, how's that guy open? And I think it's going to come down to the quarterback's legs, and that should favor Josh Allen, except time and time again on a key 3rd down late in the second half, Mahomes runs for 30. And it's just like,
Yep.
how do we see it over and over? And until the script is different, I don't know how you pick against the Chiefs. I'm not saying that's the team you want to win. I just don't know
Yeah.
how you pick against them.
No, it's 100% true. And I want to start breaking this down position by position in my head. I'm like, that's the way I'm going to figure out who I think's going to win this game. But the AFC has been super interesting. I feel like when I was looking at the AFC versus the NFC coming into the playoffs, it felt like two completely different leagues. Because the AFC, your top juggernaut teams were dominating, and it was these all-star quarterbacks with mediocre wide receiver play is essentially what you were looking at. I mean, some of them had very good run games outside the quarterback, some of them haven't, but it's your X factors are literally just the quarterback. They're raising the play of everyone around. And then you look at the NFC and it's you're questioning the quarterback play, but you have these, all pro running backs and all pro wide receivers that are elevating the offense. It's completely different when you look at it that way. So when you look at then this game, you have to look at it as Mahomes versus Allen. And I think Josh Allen's had the better year and it makes you want to pick him. But year after year, he comes out and tries to do too much in a game like this against Patrick Mahomes. And it's interesting because that's the reason we've been praising him when he's been going out there carrying the offense without the Stephon Diggs out there. He doesn't have the weapons that we thought he had at one point in his career. But then back when you think back, it's like Josh Allen's playing hero ball again. That's why he's turning the ball over. That's why they're losing games. It worries me that that's going to pop back up again. And that's why I have to go agree with you and say I would have to take Mahomes, knowing that he's going to make the smart play in the right spot. He's not going to try to do too much.
And the Super Bowl logo is red. So,
oh, well, yeah. If you're going by that, it's Chiefs Eagles next week.
Which, I mean, it feels like the most, I mean, that would be the favorites. Like the favorites winning.
Yep.
Is that. So definitely, one of the, I just hope it's a good game. I don't anticipate, just based on weapons, like no Stephon Diggs, no Tyreek Hill. Like, I don't know if it'll live up to 2021 when they lost in overtime. But I think in a different way, this could be, a gritty, 24-21 type of game. And that's the other thing, Tyler Bass has had his struggles. Harrison Butker has been there, done that. Like, he's missed when he first came back from injury, but he's been consistent, right? Like, even we talked about in the NFC, like, we didn't even mention kickers, but that Jake Elliott has been lights out in the playoffs.
Unless you're kicking extra points.
Unless you're kicking extra points. You're right. But that could be a big difference compared to, the Commanders on their fourth kicker. And he's had his misses and almost allowed his miss almost let the Lions back in the game. It didn't happen, but I think there's a lot of, if you go position by position, these two teams of the Chiefs and the Bills match up very well and should be a great way to cap off championship weekend and propel us into the Super Bowl.
Agreed. I don't think I have too much more to say about that game, though. I think we covered.
I think we did, and we did not plan to do a, do they even do, I'm sure they do DFS lineups, but we didn't plan to do one because we'd probably pick the same teams.
You'd have to play one of those 5-man captain leagues for this one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So a lot of fun, but George, unless there's something you want to talk about, although, I did just see come across Twitter, it sounds like the guy from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, going back to the Liam Cohen situation, because like I mentioned, it's unfolding as, we're coming through, that was, announced by like the insiders to be the new Raiders GM, has not been officially announced by the Raiders. So now there's some speculation that he could also flip and pair up with Cohen in Jacksonville. So we're going to find answers as soon as we get off of here, because that's, how it works recording the Couch GMs podcast. So, George, anything else you want to talk about before we or just want to call a quicker episode to this week?
I think we can call it a quicker episode. I just wanted to mention, when it comes to people signing contracts, it's official. Bill Belichick signed his contract with UNC. They had to adjust some wording, but he's not in consideration for any head coaching jobs in the NFL anymore. Just wanted to let everybody know that might be listening in.
100% agree. But George, I'm with you. We can keep this one a little bit shorter. Get ready for these games. But if you have questions or you have, anything you want to talk about, feel free to hit us up in our DMs at the Couch GMs, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and X. Pass some time, and then of course we're back getting ready for the Super Bowl Mondays and Thursdays, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, live on YouTube and Facebook. Podcast dropping the next day in your respective feeds. So that'll do it for us tonight as we get ready for championship weekend. I'm Cody Rourke. That is George Kurth. We'll talk to you all next week.